I've got to ask you, are you as embarrassed and frustrated and angry as I am? Talking about the tragedy of the Texas floods. Lots of people died, lots of people still missing, a lot of children lost. Um, and there's heartbreaking stories of a pair of sisters dying holding hands. Interestingly, the secular press noted the holding hands, but didn't say anything about them holding rosaries. I wonder why that is. There are people who said unspeakably evil, wicked, cruel things because of politics, the great God. And some people who meant well said some very foolish things to try to explain away or excuse God for this tragedy. And people are wondering, did it really have to be that way? So I'm going to make a proposal to you. Let's not say anything foolish. Not say anything political. Let's not say anything stupid. But let's respond to this public tragedy publicly as Christians. Do you think that'll catch on? Stay with me. I've got a story to tell you. Hi, I'm Jesuit Father Robert McTeigue, your host every day, the Catholic Current, via the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network. Let's take a closer look. Glad you're here. When I was a new priest and I was getting ready for my first funeral, I talked to an older Jesuit who said, "Don't make my mistake." Well, what was his mistake? Well, he had a tragic funeral to offer. He was dealing with a young man who died before his time, left behind a widow and a whole passel of young children. And just as the funeral mass is supposed to start in the front of the church, there was an awkward silence. And rather than just putting his hand over his mouth and living with the awkward silence, he decided to try to fill the silence by saying something helpful. He said, "He's in a better place." And the wife responded immediately, said, "I don't want him in a better place. I want him here with me and the kids." So he said, "If you don't know what to say, don't say anything." Some time has passed. They're still looking for bodies. I think it's time we say something, and that we say something specifically as Christians and as Catholics that is intelligent and faithful and not embarrassing. I've never brought a child into the world. I'm sure that losing a child is the worst fate a parent can suffer. But when I meet such a parent, I can't ever say, "I know just how you feel." Professor of philosophy and theology, I've taught courses on the problem of evil and suffering. I can give bibliographies, I can give diagrams, I can give slides, I can give lecture notes, I can connect all the dots. But if I were sitting in a room, say, with two parents who had lost a child, I hope they would slap me if I said, "I figured it out. I found out a way to make it okay that your child is dead." That would be horrifying. That would be unspeakable. And yet, St. Paul says, if our hope is for this life only, we are the most pitiable of men. So here's what I'm not offering: an airtight solution that explains why it's okay that young people died horribly in large numbers. I have no way of explaining why it's okay that some of their bodies will never be found and the families won't even have the closure of a burial. It's on my list of things to talk about with God when I meet him face to face once he gets through his list. I think his list will be longer than mine. Here's my point. Do we mourn as Christians, or do we mourn as practical atheists? And I'm not just talking about pie in the sky when you die. When a children dies, I don't want to sing, "He's got the whole world in his hands." And I've been around too many children who have died. But here's what I do know: Christ is faithful. How do I know that for sure? Well, here's another story. When I was 20, 21 years old, just a couple weeks before graduation for my undergraduate degree, I witnessed the violent death of my best friend. And all the things they had worked for, exams and grades and graduation and graduating with honors and honors convocations, in that moment, in that instant, it all fell away. None of it mattered anymore. And this is when I say that God did his Clint Eastwood imitation with me. God grabbed me by the scruff of the neck in his best Clint Eastwood voice, said, "Do you believe? Do you, punk?" And at 20, I had a decision to make. Either absolutely everything that the church proclaims about Christ crucified and risen is absolutely true, or human life is a bad joke that probably shouldn't have happened. Those are the two only honest options. And anything else is literally and figuratively just whistling past the cemetery. With God's grace, I think I made the right choice. When I started as a priest and religious, I would talk about preaching Christ crucified. And I found that where Christ crucified is, then also always is Christ risen and victorious. Always the two together. And then I would talk about our crucified, risen, and returning Lord, for he will return to judge the living and the dead and the world by fire. But now I add, our crucified and risen Lord is even now our reigning Lord. Christ is King, Christ is sovereign, and he is to be trusted even in the presence of mystery and tragedy and loss. If you're not sure about that, read the last chapter or two of the book of Job. My arms are too short to box with God. I don't have the intelligence or the wisdom to tell God whether or not he's doing a bad job. And I don't need to know that. I only need to know that I have heard the voice of the shepherd. And I know that there is no lie in the Christ of God. And Christ will redeem all who trust in him, and he will dry every tear. So, for those who've suffered unspeakable losses or injustices in one form or another, for those who are grieving over the loss of the poor children in the Texas flood, I want to offer you a bit of wisdom from St Ignatius Loyola. He wrote this before he died. He said, "If we had our fatherland and our true peace and our sojourn here in this world, it would be a great loss to us when persons or things that gave us so much happiness are taken away. But as we are pilgrims on this earth with our lasting city in the kingdom of heaven, we should not consider it a great loss when those whom we love departed a little before us, for we shall follow them before long to the place where Christ our Lord and Redeemer has prepared for us a most happy dwelling in his bliss." So says St. Ignatius Loyola, a great saint and a great mystic. And what about for those who mourn? Those who have to wake up every morning with that sense of loss? I'm going to ask you to learn a little French. In English, we say, "I miss you." The French say, "Tu me manques." You are missing to me. You are present to me by your very absence. I see you whenever I notice that you are not here. And that grief, that sense of loss, really is a sign of love. And love does lead to hope, not a wishful thinking, but a recognition that God is trustworthy, that he's stronger, wiser, and more good than I can understand. And meanwhile, let us comfort the mourning. Let's dry their tears. Let's bring them meals. Let's invite them into our homes and into our hearts. And let's intercede for those who grieve, whose grief has brought them to the brinks of despair. Let's offer masses for the repose of the souls of those who've died and for the consolation of those who mourn them. And always, always, let's grab our rosary and pray for the living and the dead. In response to the Texas flood, a public tragedy, let us as Christians and Catholics mourn, and let us mourn not as orphans, and not as pagans, and not as atheists, but as sons and daughters of a great Father and heirs to a great kingdom. Think on these things today, take them to prayer, and talk about it with those you love. Go in peace, and please do pray for me, for I am a sinner. Thanks for watching today. I release new videos on Mondays and Wednesdays. Check out the archives for more videos. You can listen to my podcast at stationofthecross.com, and you can find my written work at heraldofthegospel.org. See you next time.